Hello and welcome to the world as we see it. Today's Friday, the 26th of November, and we've got a very brief agenda today. Normally on a Friday we look at the church times, and that that normally doesn't take too long. So if it's a short focus on church times. Oh, thank you, Father David. If it's a short church times, then what we will be doing is nipping over and talking about twinning. It all depends what we see in the church times headlines. So, yes. Now, today, in terms of a little bit of a personal update, Susie, my other half, has received her second AstraZeneca COVID vaccine jab, and that really has knocked her for six. I think everyone I know who's over 60 has had the AstraZeneca jab, and nothing happened. They were fine. There were few rotten side effects, but with me and with Susie, I literally watched her this afternoon just go downhill, and obviously she's got fever. Then other times she looks very, very cold. So her temperature's doing all manner of things. She's all over the place, and she feels really tired and aching. Anyway, I've said to her, just go to bed. She can't sleep. She just feels rotten, and I know the feeling. So anyway, that's where she is. So I've got tomorrow off work in any event, because I'm doing some Zooming with Sarum College tomorrow, because they've got their residential weekend. And so that means I'll be able to look after Sebastian in the morning at least until about 2 p.m. And then I think what will happen is, I think either Mum will make a bed downstairs, and they can watch TV together in the afternoon, or he'll be going upstairs in the bedroom with her, and they can watch TV there, and he can muck about, and I'll just be running food and drink into them. So that's the plan for tomorrow. But she just looks very unwell, and I when you see someone who you care about who looks unwell, you just feel sorry for them. It was quite rotten, really. Little bit of bad news about my brother-in-law. I won't go into details, but that was sad. What else? Anything else? Nothing else, really. That's all of it from our end. We are planning, we're in the process of planning a very short memorial for my good friend Maurice Cass, who passed away last week, and that will be taking place next Sunday. So that's everything that's going on at our end. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click these. Oh no! Oh, it's wrong one. Wrong one. Why did that happen? So. I love this. This is so funny. It wants to work, and it's showing the wrong browser. That's showing Sarum College, Sarum Learn, which is the website we use for school. Let me see if I can get you to share the Google. Is it going to let me do that? It's going to let me do that? I'm not sure if it is it? Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Right, let's see if we can do that. Let's see if we can do a switcheroo straight over to church times, and we can. It worked. I'm so happy. Okay, that's really good news. So, there you are. It's not all bad news. Sometimes it all goes swimmingly. Now, church times. We've got the first headline. Really, is the bishops stop the rhetoric and act humanely to prevent another Channel tragedy. And I agree. I can't help it. I've clicked on this one straight away. We're going straight in there. Um, I, uh, I'm sorry to say, but the deaths of those folk on the channel, uh, I really do feel that bad policy resulted in those deaths, right? And there's no need to apportion blame, but in terms of who's responsible for policy, well, government is, and it should be governments on both sides. Just because the UK has decided to step out of the EU, they haven't, in my mind, stepped out of a moral obligation to ensure that where migrants are risking their lives, sometimes to flee poverty, and I don't care if they're called economic migrants, if they are living in places where they have to make a choice between live in a place and maybe your child starves to death or drinks, disgusting, unhealthy water, for example, or you don't have money for food despite working jolly hard, or leaving that place and going to live somewhere where maybe when you work you might be able to get your child an education and everything else that comes with living in a developed country, then we need safe routes for migration. Human beings by default move. Human beings are not static, right? We only have to look at what's happened through history, how large numbers of people have moved not just across Europe but across the world. Britain actually is quite famous for it. We went all over the place. So, I do think there is a bit of responsibility. Let's get away from accountability. We don't need to point the finger. But I do think there is responsibility to ensure that, recognise first of all that people will always move, that people will always move in all directions, that a human drawn border on a map doesn't stop one group of people moving across that border, right? And migration is going to be happening more and more, right? Especially because of the climate change effect, right? There are huge swathes of inhabited islands and countries which are, imminently over the next 5, 10, 20, 30 years, they are going to be facing serious problems. Not least because 90% of the world's cities are built either on a river at sea level or next to the sea on a coast. So it seems dreadfully obvious to me that weather is going to become more unpredictable. The seas are going to be rising in any event, whatever we do, even if everything that they've proposed that they do by 2030 and 2050, even if they do all of that stuff, cities are going to be flooding and sinking faster and suffering the effects of hurricanes, typhoons and cyclones, depending on where in the world they are. And those people need to be accommodated somewhere. And, if this is how we treat migrants going forwards, which is one of, a kind of, well, it's kind of the ostrich approach to migration, right? Bury your head in the sand and hope that by doing nothing bad happens. Well, something bad has happened. Folk have died as a result of it. And, I've told you before, I'm a little bit biased when it comes to migration and refugees because I worked with asylum seekers for a good chunk of my professional time working with homeless charities in London. And, these are very able people, right? And I would see them unable to have a work permit. Because they don't have a work permit, they're not allowed to have a bank account. Because they haven't got a bank account or a work permit, they're not allowed to pay national insurance. Well, why not? I mean, this is just my idea. I don't know, take this as you want. If folk are going to be able to get welfare, I say let them work, right? Give them all work permits, give them all national insurance numbers, make it compulsory that they are registered in the system whilst their applications are being reviewed. Let them pay into the system as their cases are reviewed, because a whole bunch of these people have huge amounts of experience in their own home countries. From my experience, lots of qualifications which are transferable, and they can add to the culture of the country that they are coming to. I kind of think that's what makes Britain great, actually, how wonderfully mixed up we are. It's excellent. I mean, we only have to have I meet folk from Britain, often living out here in Thailand, and you meet one person who says that they are Scottish. Turns out that their dad's from Finland. You meet another person who is from, one of the home counties. Turns out one of their parents is German. Well, we've always been a mixed up bunch, This isn't new. So, and of course, I suppose what is new is not just the kind of the ethnicity from within, or I say ethnicity, but the nationality from within Europe, mixing up with our own, but also different ethnic groups, different ethnic minority groups. And, well, I suppose I'm biased there, having lived in Thailand and having a mixed race son, who also happens to be British. So, yeah, I am biased on this. I'm unable when I read about this to sit on the fence. Now, the Bishop of Dover, the Right Reverend Rhodes Hudson Wilkin, has expressed her anger and outrage at the disaster on Wednesday, in which 27 migrants, 17 men, 7 women, and 3 children, drowned when their inflatable boat capsized in the English Channel. Migration must stop being used as a political football, she warned. I'm feeling a deep inner rage that the world continues to allow this to happen, quite right, couched with political rhetoric as to whose fault it is. It is all our fault. We must all take responsibility. Brilliant! The new immigration asylum bill, backed by the Commons as its first reading in July, will make arriving in the UK without permission a criminal offence. Ridiculous. Ridiculous. Nonsense. How can you... I mean, it's ludicrous. Ludicrous, in my opinion. Right? So gives powers to return asylum seekers to safe third countries if they pass through any before arriving in the UK. So border force officials will have the power to turn back boats and attempt to cross the channel and use reasonable force if necessary. Well, reasonable force. I'm sorry. I always see when someone says reasonable force, I always think about the poll tax riots, right? I remember, maybe I was just impressionable during that time, but I remember the demonstrations when I was a child on television, seeing it wasn't long after, it wasn't that long after the pit closures, right? So we had all of these problems of the miners' strikes. And the seeing, baton flaying policemen, hitting, striking miners, and then I went on to seeing more baton wielding, horse riding policemen trampling on protesters in places like Trafalgar Square, people who didn't like the poll tax. For all sorts of different reasons. And those police who I just saw hitting people, and it obviously left an impression on me as a child when I was watching this. Now, bearing in mind, I think in both cases, I think my father was probably on the side of the police, having been a policeman. I really wasn't. I just thought it was horrendous seeing reasonable force used by the police in that way. And so reasonable force does include being rather physical. That's what I remember seeing. And that's what they're saying here, aren't they? They're saying that they can use reasonable force. Well, these people are desperate. They're profoundly desperate. They wouldn't be doing what they are doing unless, and I think what should happen, actually, let me tell you what I think should happen. I think they should be looking at the cases of individuals, whether they're in France or not, whether they're in Germany or Hungary or whatever. If there are folk who are living in Hungary and, they have relatives or whoever, whatever the connection is, if that's the reason they're trying to go to England, because actually they know people in England, then that's probably why they're going there, right? I know that some people say, no, they're going for the benefits. But there's been huge, massive amounts of research done in the UK, right? Loads of research, which demonstrates that people who are migrants to the UK pay more into the system than the amount they receive. On the whole, the vast majority. Now, of course, there's a minority of migrants in the same way that there are a minority of white British folk who take more from the system than they pay in. That minority is the same the world over. But in the case of migrants, they contribute so much more than the amount they take. And if it's if it's all about jobs and if it's about money, well, they make us money. That's what they do. They're very entrepreneurial. They very often will set up businesses. They very often will employ other folk. They have a drive to improve their lot more so than the average British person does, right? And what they don't have, which in my experience of having worked with folk, who are living with poverty in the UK, British folk do tend to see the welfare system as a right, as a network, as a support network, which will inevitably catch them. These migrants don't. So when there is something that they are able to claim for, very often they're not aware of it. And when they do get something, it's a bonus to them. It's surprising to them. So I really do think that this kind of policy, it's populist. It plays to the same groups of people who voted for Brexit, which are easily manipulated by the same group of marketeers who appear to be behind almost everything that our current ruling politicians seem to have. And it's not about the hue of the political party. I don't really care about that, actually. It's about those policies. It's the policies which I would like to chat about. So I do think that the Bishop of Dover is quite right. Now, speaking at the House of Lords debate on Thursday, the Bishop of Coventry, Dr. Christopher Coxworth, said that a policy of deterrence that did not also provide adequate and safe alternatives for migrants was insufficient. I fear that in seeking to preserve life, it may not only fail to do so, but also harm our underlying commitments to the dignity of life and the promotion of justice. Agreed. I agree with you, Dr. Christopher Coxworth, Bishop. I agree with you. Anyway, now, many of those migrants have so little to lose, will have suffered so much in their homeland, and are so close to the finishing line that Britain will always be worth aiming for, no matter how difficult we make it for them. They will not be deterred by yesterday's events. In fact, we know from today's crossings that they are not, nor by our efforts to make things even more difficult for them. Of course they're not, because, you know, it's a bizarre state of affairs. If they've come from a war zone where the odds of dying was, 50-50, or they've come from a place struck by famine where they've watched half or three-quarters of their family perish, the prospect of drowning, well, actually, for the vast majority of them, they are, and it doesn't matter whether they are Muslim or whether they are Christian, the vast majority of asylum seekers who I met were God-fearing folk. They believed in God 100%, and 100% will, I'm sure, say, well, we'll get into this rubber ring. And so, excellent. So we've got a comment from DDR Nav 314. If we assume the whole group of those migrants coming should be accepted, should there be an upper limit? How or when would you limit? That allows a question. I imagine there is a negative limit mathematically. I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Is there an upper limit? Is always so now. I know this is where it gets complicated, isn't it? This is where it gets complicated. Now, I'm not going to fall at the first bowl. If you see, it is tough. I know it's tough. So now there didn't used to be limits, right? There didn't used to be limits. Really, I remember the first time limits were, idealism is great until limits and boundaries are imagined. It's true. So there didn't used to be limits until, I think I remember, the Bosnia, it was the whole Serb Croat business, and that whole that thing that occurred there, and we had so actually that's when, now who was it who did it? I can't remember which politician it was, but I think it was about 1993 or 4, where suddenly the government decided for the first time that asylum seekers and refugees were not allowed to have open access to the welfare system, job seekers allowance or whatever it was at the time. These days it's called universal credit. But back then it was job seeker allowance and housing benefit and things like that. And so they cut, that was the first time that they cut in the mid-90s all of the benefits across the board, refugees and asylum seekers. So up until that time, there had been no numbers, right? Because similar to the NHS, folk were able to apply, and it was just you were accepted upon application by definition. Now they chopped all of the benefits, and I remember that there was a test case put by it was a lawyer, in fact, in Lambeth called Titus Miranda. I don't know where I'm getting this from, but it's true. Titus Miranda, who had a Chinese asylum seeker client, and he argued that this client, the responsibility, if central government were not going to accommodate this person, if central government were not going to give them benefits for housing benefit and job seekers allowance and everything else, and they were literally destitute because of policy, then the National Assistance Act, which was something which places local authorities as being responsible, they had to pick up the bill. And that's where we still are. So it's local authorities who have to pick up the bill for asylum seekers and refugees living in their areas. And that makes it supremely political, because local authorities don't have cash, especially if you are in an area which happens to have a city where asylum seekers and refugees will tend to congregate, because that's where there are, opportunities to eat their own food or to meet folk who come from similar countries to them, or to hear their own language or whatever, right? So the chances of having a social support network. So is it necessary to have upper limits? Is it necessary to have these quotas and things like that? Well, I think, we all the way from the end of the Second World War until the mid-90s, we didn't at all. Now, hold on. Hold on. Oh, no. What does it say? Why? 6 messages were deleted. Why? I don't know why 6 messages were deleted. And it says stream elements timed out DDR nav for 300 seconds. Why? I don't know. I apologise to you. I don't know why that's happened. This is obviously a strange setting. And I don't know why that happened. So I need to see why that happened and fix that. But let's hold on. Oh no, because you obviously sat and typed that really good message, which I just saw as a flash and it disappeared. So I don't know what happened there, and I can't undo 300 seconds. That's ages. That's 5 minutes. Look, I'm just going to carry on as if that didn't happen. But I can't apologise to you enough, and I will get the settings for this thing sorted, because obviously that's really annoying. That's really annoying. Why it did that, I've got no idea. Anyway, look. Point is, I tell you what, I know what I'm going to do. We'll do it that way. I will see. Why did I do that? We won't do that. I'll fix it so it works from tomorrow onwards. Okay, but whatever happened, 6 messages were deleted by the moderator, but I'm not sure why. I think just because of the speed of typing, maybe. I'm not sure if it just thought you were a robot. Anyway, look. I'm going to go out on a limb, controversial as it is, and say we didn't need these numbers, right, for a long time. I believe that there needs to be, this is what I think there needs to be. There should be international agreements which have been set up by national governments, and national governments should they should get together and they should say, okay, let's sort this out, not only looking at it from our own selfish domestic policy point of view. Let's sort this out from a humanitarian point of view, and there should be like the Red Cross and the Medical Foundation for the Care of Victims of Torture and Prisoners of Conscience Foundation and Amnesty International. All these other groups need to get involved and create routes for migration, safe routes for migration out of these disaster zones, right? The ones which exist at the moment, which include places like Afghanistan, and all of these other countries where folk, for all manner of different reasons, can be persecuted, as well as places where there are famines, as well as places where there are all manner of different problems why people need to migrate. And then on the way along these, so I really want to hear your views. Well, the moderating bot says I really want to hear your views. And then it goes and deletes 6 of a great person's messages for 5 whole minutes. So I'm really annoyed about that. So I'll have to sort this out. Now, along these safe routes of migration, they could have safe havens, right? They could have offices specifically related to, welfare. So they could say, look, if you've walked far enough, right, and you're now in Italy or you're in Greece, right, every single country should have on the safe route of migration these centres where you have to check in on the way. If not, you're going to be sent back to the last one, right? A bit like a Monopoly board. And they could go in there, and in there could be people, trained professionals, engaging with them, showing them the fact that they can resettle here. These are the opportunities. There's housing, health, education, and employment, which effectively is welfare, right? And so when they're in Greece, they could be shown the merits, the benefits of living in Greece. I mean, there are places in Greece right now, not just Greece, but Italy and Portugal as well, where there are houses in villages where they don't have enough young people. And you can buy a house in these villages for €1, so long as you do it up, right? Well, why can't you have asylum seekers and refugees moving into those villages? You can. You can have young people. You could put life into that village instantly. You could refill the schools instantly, right? So I think if I were in charge of fixing this, that's what I would have. I'd have like a specific route all the way, and for most people, they're crossing the Mediterranean. Right? We know this. Most of these people are coming up either across the Mediterranean or out from Turkey across Eastern Europe and into Europe. And the migration is massive. I mean, it's a huge distance, and they're coming either from places like Afghanistan, or they're coming from places in Africa, right? And I kind of think that what we could have is a system where they are given housing, right? Why not? We can all, and not just them. I always thought this about homeless folk. When we were part of the EU, I never understood why we weren't looking at resettlement of homeless folk to places where there wasn't enough people, where there's lots of housing but not many people. It just, to me, makes lots of sense. So there are ways and means, and I know I'm the first to admit I'm not the cleverest person here, right? I know that. There are really clever people, really well-educated people who know all about economics and psychology and anthropology and how people move. And if you had, lots of brains in the room, all of these agencies who are involved in refugees, UNHCR and stuff, and you came up with a system and got the countries which are most likely to benefit from migrants and refugees, one way or the other, to sign up to the system. I think you could create something which snags the majority, which actually is the case. Actually, as I'm saying this is the case anyway. You only have to look at the numbers of refugees accepted by places like Germany, right? In Germany, there's one refugee for every 12 people or something. I mean, it's a huge number of migration every year, and it's the same for most European countries. You look at Britain, and it's one refugee for every 1,200 people, right? So I do think that it's a political numbers game. I think the Bishop of Dover is quite right. I think they're using it as a bit of a football because they win points doing it. But as I say, before the mid-90s, no one was keeping an eye on it at all, and it wasn't a political issue. It wasn't a political issue. Margaret Thatcher wasn't going on about refugees and asylum seekers. Ted Heath wasn't talking about migrants and asylum seekers. And in effect, the numbers of migrants and asylum seekers really was at its height immediately, prior to and after the Second World War. That's when the most mass movement was going on between Europe and the UK. And huge numbers of people settled in the UK without any problems whatsoever. I say without any problems whatsoever. Of course there were cultural problems. Of course there were problems in neighbourhoods. Where people say, that person took my job. No, they didn't. They took a job, and you can go and get another job. You know, that's it. There are. This is the nature. These days, actually, the world is a lot flatter than it all ever was in terms of jobs. So, anyway, look, I feel talked out on the issue. That's where I stand. I'm agreeing with the Bishop of Dover and the other bishop too. So there we are. That's my tuppence worth. Okay. Good. Now let's church-run food pantries in Wigan provide ownership and self-esteem. Good idea. Look. Okay. The most deprived housing estates in Manchester, right, plans to be food bank free by 2030. Now, how are they going to do that? This is a good idea. This is a good idea. Food pantry based in Wigan's churches. In place of food handouts, they offer once or twice weekly shopping baskets of 20 basic items for an annual fee. Here we are. Politics changes things, and fear in particular, whether reasonable or not. Cool thing is, you dealt with my focus indirectly. Demand to be somewhere versus supply. Some limit of how many can be somewhere. Well, yeah, but my point is trying to snag them on the way, which actually does happen in any event. And if they get to the UK, and if they put in their asylum seeker application, which means it needs to be reviewed on its merits, and if they are, having weighed against the evidence, and in the case of the folk who I worked with, they always actually 100% had been victims of torture. They had physical scars. Emotionally, they were shot to pieces, but they had evidence of what had happened to them. And so it was inevitable that they were legitimate. They were from this area. You only had to look at newspapers to see what was going on in the place where they had come from, and then they showed you what had happened to them, or they told you, what had happened to their mothers or whatever. And they were terribly damaged people. And those folk, I think, yes, they made it to the UK, they got that far, and they're refugees, and that's it. Fine, let's deal with them individually. But I don't know. I do. I mean, one thing we don't often talk about is how many people leave the UK. So I'm one of those people who have left. I left the UK, mostly driven by the weather, really. So the chance to live in Thailand, where it's summer every day, compared to living in England, where it's very grey skies, and if ever you've done a commute from London, on the last train from Charing Cross, you see lots of very grey people. I actually remember I was sitting on the train going to London for an early shift once to a hostel in Covent Garden, and a woman got on the train, and these were slam door trains back in the day, and she got on the train at Rochester, and as she sat down, she actually said, 8 more years to go. And I remember saying, can you, what was that? So she said, I've got 8 more years and then I'm retired, dear. And so the person next to her said, oh, I've got 15. And then the person next to her, because there was three opposite three of us, right? This person said, I've got 15. Another person there said, oh, I'm finished in 2. And it was like we were talking about a prison sentence, right? And the 2 people next to me, they said, I forget how many whatever their numbers were. And they looked at me, they all looked at me, and I remember saying, this tells you how long ago it was. I said to them, I'm 23. And it was terrible. It was really terrible. I don't know what, so yeah, that's why I moved. I didn't have the the poverty and drama that these folk have. But there are lots of people leaving England. There are lots of British folk living over here in Thailand. And, you can look anywhere in the world and you'll find British folk. In the same way, I remember I went on with my best friend on the Trans-Mongolian Railway many years ago. And we got to Ulaanbaatar, and it was in, it was New Year, so it was probably maybe the 1st or 2nd of January. And we got off the train, and it was -40 in Ulaanbaatar. And we decided to venture out. We put literally all of our clothes on. I remember having like 2 hats and 3 scarves and 2 jackets and 3 pairs of trousers and 5 pairs of socks and things. And we went out for a walking around. And there, in the middle of Ulaanbaatar, is an Irish pub selling Guinness. It's amazing. They get everywhere. So, and it's whenever you see an Irish pub, actually there are always British people in there too. So the irony, So it's we get everywhere. I kind of think there's a quid pro quo there. Anyway, now Leicestershire. So for £5, a fee of £5 and a payment of whatever the recipient can afford, they're going to get baskets twice a week with 20 items, 40 items a week. I wonder if that's per individual. There you are, look. So, yes, even in Japan was the central place of British expats. Of course, yeah. So, it's funny, isn't it? So, I think this is a good idea. I thought of this idea, actually. We thought of a similar idea, me and a member of our congregation. If only we had the money to set it up. But there are lots and lots of ad hoc food handouts here in Thailand, in Pattaya. And it seems very unorganised. It seems to be done in a way that's unsustainable. So what I was thinking is maybe setting up a noodle bar, because they're pretty cheap. And if somebody can't afford the 20 baht or whatever it is for a simple bowl of noodles, then they should get that simple bowl of noodles for free. Everyone else who's a paying customer probably won't be buying the simple bowl of noodles. They'll be buying, other things with meatballs and all of the added extras that you get with noodles. But I do think that I see what were we going to call it? We were going to call it the soup kitchen. That was the idea. So we were going to call it the soup kitchen. And we thought it was one of these evenings where we were sitting in a restaurant and thinking about all the different ideas which we could do to help the homeless folk and those affected by poverty because of COVID. But I honestly think that going forwards, it's still a legitimate and good idea, if only we can get the funding for it, pump priming funding to get just a little rental shop, very easy to set up, low cost, and just do it. Start it as a legitimate business, and then as it makes its own money because of paying customers, a share of the money it makes, you're just subsidising free food to folk who can't afford their own food. Maybe limit it to 1 a day or 2 a day or something. I think actually if it's only noodles in a bowl, twice a day would be perfectly reasonable, maybe even with a glass of water, right? Treating people like humans. And if those homeless folk don't have, a T-shirt, give them a T-shirt so that they can sit down at a table and feel that they can eat with respect, So that was an idea that I had, a soup kitchen. And it would play very well because when English reading people would see the name Soup Kitchen, they know that it's a charitable affair. And yet, in the terms of the Thai translation, it would simply mean the Soup Kitchen is a name of a restaurant. They don't have that kind of connotation that we have, So that was one of the ideas we had anyway. So yeah, this is a good idea. Anything I think that gives people self-respect is a good idea. So Sarah here is collecting food supplies at Ashton Pantry in St Thomas's Church Hall, and good idea. And Sarah should be given the dignity and respect the same as anybody else, just because she hasn't got any money. Good for her. Go and get some food from folk who have decided to help you out and give you some food. What's a brilliant idea? What a shame it's even necessary, right? In Britain, it's yeah. To my mind, it's ludicrous. In fact, how it's even necessary in Britain that people are living with food poverty. I reflect on Germany. This idea that in Germany they don't really have this notion of a charity sector as such, and that's because taxation is so high that any welfare is simply provided by the government. Well, that's a good idea, isn't it? That's a good idea. So nobody falls through the gaps, because there are no gaps, because it's German, of course. It's been designed in a way that they don't have gaps. But in Britain, it seems to me that welfare has been cut so much, certainly over the last 15 years. And not just because, as I say, I stress this, not just because of the Conservative government, but the coalition before them, and actually even Labour before them did a fair amount of cuts to welfare. It was pretty tough. So yeah, look, it's not about individual political parties. It's just a shame of the whole sorry state of affairs. Okay, so Belarus. Look, church leaders urge measures to end the refugee crisis in Belarus. Now, the Belarus refugee crisis is a fine example where safe, routes of migration need to be assisted and enabled, and where there could be these safe haven drop-ins where people have to seek advice, on the way. Is there anything you need? And you could, in the same way that these food pantries are set up, you could set it up like a food pantry, ensuring that everyone has been interviewed by the 2 or 3 or 4 different agencies which are relevant to them, encouraging them to stay along the way. That's it. That's what I would do if I were in charge. Of course, I'm not. So now what have we got? Stop exploitation of children online. Good idea. I mean, and I'm not sure if that's a headline. Some of these things, sometimes I'm a bit, is that headline worthy? Don't we all just agree to stop exploitation of children online? Shouldn't there be legislation already in place? Hasn't this been a conversation going on for 10 years or more? I think so. Now, I think the auction of stonework, which has raised £12,000 for Gloucester Cathedral, I think is a great idea. Right? The opportunity to own a piece of the building's fabric. What a great idea, right? What an excellent idea. So, not just, little bits of it, but great chunks of it as well. And I can't help but think that all cathedrals could be doing that. I remember seeing that Canterbury Cathedral, the number of years that Canterbury Cathedral... Oh, what does this say? If you've enjoyed watching the transmission... Oh, that's the moderating bot. It keeps going, doesn't it? Sorry about that. It's so rubbish. I'll have to... Because of you, DDR Nav 314, I'm going to have to overhaul the moderating bot and really get to grips with what he's doing, because it's a bit rubbish. And also stop that thing about 300 seconds. Look, he's done it again. How annoying. Now, I think this is a good idea. Canterbury Cathedral, I remember reading, has only spent this tiny sliver of time out of its 600 years or whatever it is, or more, that it's been standing there, there's this tiny sliver of time when it hasn't had scaffolding leading up against it with the masons tapping away, replacing bits and pieces of it. So there's plenty of stonework, old stonework that's got too porous or become a bit rubbish, and I can't help but think that the odd gargoyle, the odd head of a saint, who knows if it's been worn by water to the point of being unrecognisable, but we know who it's meant to be. Well, sell that, because that would be brilliant. Good idea. What a brilliant innovation, right? Good idea. So you can buy. Very good. Yeah. Now let's carry on. Let's carry on looking at what else there is. And I think that's pretty much it. When we get to the bottom, and the obituary of Reverend Dr. Anne Townsend. That's sad, but pretty much that is as far as we're going to get now. So I don't know why my computer goes so slow when. Sorry about that. I'm still a little bit affected by a cold, and not a lot I can do really. So occasionally, if I sniff, I apologise. Now, what we are going to do, I think we won't bother with the twinning. I was going to talk about twinning, and if you're at a church that would like to twin without, then get in touch. But I feel like I remember, actually, this is a phrase I haven't heard for a while, but it does apply to me. I feel like I've hammered that nail in far enough now. And it's true, isn't it? How many times do we need to say? Yeah, the idea of used blessed bits of the cathedrals is cool, isn't it? I don't know why. I would like a bit of cathedral on my desk as a paperweight or something, or on the mantelpiece, right? So a little bit of objet d'art that when folk come around, I'm able to point out and say, yeah, yes. And in fact, if they all did it, and if they all did it routinely, it would be really interesting, because then you would get people like me who would want to have a collection, right? So I'd have a collection of these lumps of stonework on the mantle, and I'd be able, probably having a little piece of paper or something stuck to the bottom of it, so people could pick them up and it would say Canterbury, Lincoln, Rochester, who knows where. I mean, and you could even, if this idea were to spread further afield, you could get them from plenty of other foreign cathedrals too. I mean, that would be amazing, wouldn't it? It would be one of the reasons to travel more, wouldn't it? So for me anyway, that's the only excuse I would need to travel more, right? Should we go and get a bit of rock from Notre Dame? Let's go there. Let's go. Well, actually, go anywhere. There are cathedrals all over the world, so I think that'd be great. I think we should lobby all of the cathedrals to say start selling off your bits of old rock. And they could even do small, very small bits in gift shops for like $5 or $10, right? So very, very small bits. So then you could get young people involved in the collecting of them as well. I think that was an excellent idea. Yes, that's something I feel like I want to send some emails now, just to get it done, right? Just to get the idea, not just one, but having it as a standard. That's what I would like. I'd like it to be standard practice for all cathedrals to sell bits of their old rock, and it would be a little bit. Now I don't know. There was this transit company, a haulage company in the UK called Eddie Stobart, and Eddie Stobart trucks had. They were named. They were named with women's names, right? So Anne Marie or something. And you get these people, a bit like train spotters, but they're or plane spotters even, anoraks, and they could buy an Eddie Stobart blazer, right? And they'd buy an Eddie Stobart book. And what they would do is they would stand on motorway bridges and things, and they they would mark off which Eddie Stobart truck they had seen, right? And I think you could have a similar. I mean, I know this would work for me. You could have a similar thing with the rocks, right? So you could actually have a kind of catalogue of naming all of the cathedrals around the world, and collectors, enthusiasts, I don't know what we would call them really, would, cathedral files, I suppose they are, they would, get their piece of rock, add it to their collection, and mark it off in the catalogue with the date that they got that piece of stone, and they'd have to reference it. So, and that would work really well. Yeah, I would do that. That'd be great. I think that's a great idea. Yes, nice. Collectors could keep track of pieces, encourage tourism. It's true, right? Yes, there you are. I think we're onto something. We're onto something. We, DDR Nav 314, we could be in charge of the Facebook group, right? And all of it. What a great idea. We could do that, and certainly as far as St George's here in Thailand is concerned, we could generate a bit of income there, right? We could do. I don't know how to do it. We'd have to make sure it's the official guide, right? So how to take that forward? Who knows? It's a food for thought, right? Yeah, food for thought. Now we have come to that part in the evening where we need to start thinking about stopping the chat and, in fact, calming down and reflecting on the day. And I always do like to stress the point that there are some... Oh, hold on. My favourite places to visit: churches, libraries, museums, and old pubs. Well, I think you and I too. I think maybe we are, cut from the same cloth. So, and I think there are a lot of people like us as well. So, yes. Look, this is food for thought. We've got to take this forward. But I'm aware that we've been doing this for about an hour. So, and that's just me talking too much. Apologies to everyone. It's a good idea. It is nonetheless. It's a very good idea. And they do that. They do that a little bit here. We have something called the what's it called? The Sanctuary of Truth, which is like a big wooden temple here. And they sell off some of the old wood to make money for the temple. So that's something they do here. Anyway, we are going to be saying the Lord's Prayer. And if that's not your cup of tea, then I urge you in any event to stop what you're doing at least and put down your mobile phone and spend a couple of minutes just to have a thought break, a moment of peace, a moment of quiet, where you can just consider the day, think about what went right, what went wrong, consider what lessons maybe you've learnt for the day, think about what you're going to do tomorrow, and that's only if you don't want to join in. If you do want to join in, if you would like to, then you are encouraged with everyone else to pray with confidence to the Father as our Saviour has taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. Eternal Father, whose Son Jesus Christ ascended to the throne of heaven, that he might rule over all things as Lord and King. Keep the Church in the unity of the Spirit and in the bond of peace, and bring the whole created order to worship at his feet, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. So, I'm going to give a huge amount of credit to DDR Nav 314 because you honestly have made this evening very, very engaging and entertaining for me, certainly. Hopefully that has helped other people who have been watching too, and hopefully that encourages other people to get involved and to have a chat along the way. Now, I'm going to say to you, oh, that wasn't what I was going to say, but anyway, I've said that, so forgive me. I did say I had a bit of a cold. Now, I'm going to say thank you for joining me on this step on the journey along my road to, to ordination. Yes, thank you very much, DDR Nav 30 or 314. Thank you to Father David Price, who, really I'm constantly indebted to for the support and guidance he gives me. And, as always, I encourage everyone to pray for him. I'm just going to finish now, I think, because I do, believe it or not, I have to go and blow my nose, so that's the truth of it. So, with prayers and best wishes, I will say to you, bye-bye for now. Bye-bye.